Okay,
you can throw it in there. And just know that the other two people, Brad and Amy, can see it. So if you're complaining about one of them, that you just don't send it there.
Yeah, that needs to go in a DM to James.
That's Twitter DMs. Got it.
Yes.
So
we should be live. Oh, also, we shouldn't be live?
No, I was just going to say, I was going to bring up some hot drama.
Oh, gosh.
Everybody
you have
loves
drama?
I don't have drama, but I have drama we can talk about.
Go.
Tell me more. Just between us girls. That's what. Who said that to us?
Taylor Dressen.
Taylor. Desson. Yeah.
Desson.
He's speaking at All Things Open, by the way, so we'll get to hang out with Taylor
wonderful.
Again. Yeah, I'm excited about
that. I'm definitely pulling him in on my wild hair idea.
Oh.
So I'll share this. Yeah. So if you're already in the chat, you can talk about how much you want to do this. My wild hair idea is I want to do a event in Nashville where the entire platform is podcasters. So if you can come and listen to people record all their episodes live. So it's not for podcasters, but the platform is podcasters. So
it's a cool idea.
And, I've already started to get buy-in from some people. I just need money. So any funders out there,
they're looking for a conference to fund. Got a few people on YouTube hanging out with us, Christian and Keel. I'm gonna grab something out of my backpack. I'm gonna show you my most prized possession that hopefully Christian will appreciate from my trip to Berlin. I'm gonna go grab my most prized possession. I'll be back.
Oh man, the suspense, it's killing me.
Yeah.
All right, did the suspense build up enough? Are you ready for it?
We're dying. Like I can't go on.
I know, me too. It's a Sprachführer, which is like a phrase book for German and English.
You did.
Oh, there it is.
There it goes.
So it's interesting. It's actually for German readers or German speakers to learn English. So like all of the phonetic.
Did you just hand it to people?
No. It works both ways. Like I can see the phrases, and I just go the opposite way instead.
I thought you're just like, I don't speak German. Use this.
No.
Just read right to left.
Yeah. But what's interesting about it is they have phonetic pronunciations of the English, but written in German. Like so, the way that Germans would write phonetics about German, they have the German phonetics for English. Because I was like, what is that? But it's German phonetics for English. I thought it was really cool. So, anyway.
It's pretty close from what I remember. German phonetics to English phonetics. Like a lot of it.
Yeah, but they have
that weird character.
They have a few. Well, like the actual letters, yes. But like you see the teal blue, like that wouldn't that's not super legible to
I can't. Oh, hey, let me do a different screen. Oh, not Brad. Hold on. I can switch people.
Show me yourself, Brad.
I'm trying to switch over. I can't. How do I highlight? Oh, that didn't work. That's full screen on my computer.
I'm pulling away because my arms are tired. But
that's fine.
Anyway.
Amy, how was Next.js Conf?
What do you mean about that? German?
You want to hear about that? It was very good. I don't know though. Okay. This is very interesting. I don't know if everybody knows this or not. It was like 2 conferences happening in parallel.
2 tracks, right?
Yeah. Well, no, beyond that. So
what are the conferences?
If you count the tracks, then it's like 3. Ooh. So what happened was if you were a speaker, you pre-recorded everything. And that's what they broadcast. So if you attended it virtually, that you saw my pre-recorded talk. And they had 2 tracks virtually that were going on. So they had 20 speakers. If you came to the conference in person, then they broadcast the keynote live, and there was a Q&A session at the end. I think that they broadcast with the founder and one of their advisors. And everything else at the conference was like either Q&A or demo, and those were not broadcast live. But that's the only thing that was available to the people there in person. So it was like, even though I was there, nobody knew I was a speaker, which is kind of an interesting spin on things.
So you didn't get the respect you deserved.
Exactly. No, I'm just kidding. Well, if you're speaking, people come up to you and like, hey, I saw you. I want to talk to you. I didn't have that. So that was a little different for me. The other thing, I I totally take this on myself. I should have pushed myself. I didn't go to the after party. I wish I had gone to the after party in retrospect, but it was from 8 to 11 Pacific
Which
time.
is 2 hours.
So it felt like I was
Yeah.
going out at 10 o'clock at night, 10
There's
to
a
1.
TikTok about this.
And I'm just so old. I couldn't do it. So anyways, in retrospect, I should have pushed myself and like, I'm here, YOLO. So that's totally on
Yeah.
me. But
Yeah. I've definitely been in that position before. It's a challenge for me.
yeah.
I texted
Yeah.
a friend last night at like 8:30, and I was like, "Hey, I want to catch up on this thing that we talked about before and haven't talked about in a while, but I'm going to bed, so I'll talk to you about it tomorrow." And she texted me like 30 minutes later, which I didn't see until this morning. And she was like, "You didn't seriously go to bed at 9 o'clock." And I was like, "Yeah, I did."
I did. So
100%.
yeah, there's that. There's that. I just always feel like I'm in the twilight zone. I think I've talked about this when I go to the West Coast because my body does not line up with the sun. And so I would wake up at 5 o'clock and feel like I had been sleeping in, which was a strange feeling. But yeah.
Timing wise, it's weird right now with daylight because it's like so dark right now in the morning.
Well, and it was dark there. It was
6
dark
or
till
even
at
7.
least 7 there.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, it's 9. The day's morning's over. So yeah. But okay, so for people listening, the cool part, the really interesting thing was they announced TurboPack at the conference. And so
And they had mentioned this before, right? Like they mentioned this like a year
Did
ago,
they?
I thought.
Or did they
Well-
announce Turbo Repo? Isn't it
Turbo Repo is
Repo?
already a thing.
Yeah.
They
Well,
just
okay.
acquired.
They acquired Turbo
hired
Repo.
Jared
Yep.
Palmer.
Yep.
But
Yep.
there was something they had talked about their own compiler like last year.
Maybe.
But
They
no,
switched to. I thought they switched to SWC.
maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, in their own build step.
Okay. So then this thing, Turbo what?
Go pack.
Turbo
Turbo
Pack.
Pack.
Yeah.
It is a brand new announcement thing, and it's a
Yeah, I think
it's like
so.
a full
Yeah.
replacement for the bundler
For-
and compiler.
For Webpack. It's a replacement. It's a or Webpack successor. So
Rust based, yeah. Webpack,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So the crazy thing was they were saying it's 700 times faster than Webpack, and it's like 17 times faster than Vite, which everybody's like, what? Like,
But Vite is
It's
also
Vite
written
so
in
fast.
Rust, right?
Go, I
Mm,
think.
Or
Yeah,
Go.
okay,
Oh,
there you
that's
go.
right. Okay.
yeah.
What's interesting is Evan, you put out a tweet this morning saying, "So I tried benchmarking the
And he
two,
didn't get anything.
and he's like, it's like Vite showing faster for me."
Well-
on the lowest common denominator type of application,
Yeah.
like
That's
just
what I was gonna
a
say.
one pager. Yeah.
Because
So
I
it
saw
begins.
somebody tweet and they're like, we dug into their stats and they're saying they tested 10,000 components. They're like, I've never worked on a project that has 10,000 components. So
Yeah.
like the average
yeah.
use case, I'm not sure if you'll see those same stats.
And I feel like you can find some sort of test for whatever the thing is that you have to make your thing look better. Not that I'm saying that like they are being shady or anything. I'm just saying like
Right.
there's always a way to find a test that's going to make your thing look
So
really
I'll
good.
include this because this is like a huge shout out to Trevor. So Trevor is the CEO at Zeal, and yeah, he did a data visualization talk that is one of my favorite talks, and it's all about that. How do you tell stories with data and the responsibility that comes with data and telling those stories? And so, for one of the prime examples that he uses in the talk is like if you look at, say, I think it's like maybe the budget spend or the number of people that are involved in the armed services. And it's like, you look at that number, either I can't remember whether it's people or money, either way, it's ridiculous compared to other countries. But you look at that and you're like, that's crazy that we spend that much money. But if you look at, say, the economy size compared to the spend, it's minuscule. And there are far other countries that are spending beyond their reach when you look at it in that context. So just stuff like that is really fascinating that you can tell the story like, oh man, we spend crazy amounts of money, or we don't spend nearly enough compared to these other countries. It's just all about how you spend it.
Yep.
I'll find the talk because it's very good.
It would be really cool. It's one of the things I mentioned to someone recently is I'm kind of struggling with what to talk about, like what to pitch in talks going forward. Because I'm not the most technical person at this point. Like my strength is not technical. Like I feel like I'm competent enough to have conversations with everybody and build cool stuff and whatever. But that like I'm not gonna have as much insight as this as someone who writes code every day as their job and or builds like Turbo Repo or like whatever the tools are. So I'm trying to kind of
Mm.
figure out what that is. And I think a lot of my stuff will become more like career motivational content related stuff.
Mm. Do
C
you
Sharp
pay
Fritz is
atten-
hanging out with us on Twitch, by the way. What's
do you
up?
pay attention to the numbers? Like what's resonating?
Numbers from the stuff that I do.
Yeah, like if you're pivoting, say like to talk more about career stuff, do you check to see, well, is that even what people want, or am I just gonna like leave them behind?
I don't really know what numbers to look at because like it's looking at a number of people in an audience at a conference is not necessarily a tell of how good you're talking. Like it just depends on a lot of different things. So I don't really know.
You're
But
talking about like at conferences versus YouTube.
yeah.
Got
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. So one thing I want to make sure we stop, and then we should get started in a second.
Yes.
I said hi to C Sharp Fritz. What I didn't do, and I didn't realize this at first, was call out that they rated with 90 people. So we got a ton of people just hanging out from his stream. So thanks for joining us. For context, what we're doing, we haven't officially started. This is just our like kind of chat
Banter.
before we officially start. Yeah, this is our banter. And anyway, you could tell us if we should move along quicker, but this is a live episode of our Compressed FM podcast. So in this episode, Lane is going to be talking to us about breaking into tech with just a portfolio, which I'm super excited to talk about. And on that note, we should probably get started if y'all are ready. For people, again, that are hanging out with us in chat, love to have questions and comments as we go through this. So this will be, the audio for this will be taken and published on our podcast after the fact. The video will live forever on YouTube, and we love for it to be interactive for people that have questions and comments. So please continue to do that, and we'll make sure to call those out and have that be a part of the conversation that we have. Cool. Hey, Amy, you like smiled or reacted to something.
You said it'll be forever on YouTube. So
Assuming YouTube doesn't
whispered forever.
Yeah. Oh, forever.
Sounds like a threat.
Yeah, no, forever YouTube, which I feel like opens the conversation for like the
Web3.
Web3. Yeah, exactly. Like that's a perfect cue for someone in that community to be like, well, you're at the whim of a big company. But anyway, let's get started. All right, I'll do like a 2-second pause, then we'll kick it off. Welcome everyone to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web development and design with a little bit of zest. In this episode, I'm super excited to talk about breaking into tech with just a portfolio. This is actually something that I have been speaking a lot about, not necessarily the portfolio part, but just helping people get into tech. So I think this is going to be a useful one for lots of people across the board. My name is James Q. Quick, and I am a full-time technical content creator.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton, and I am the Director of Design at Zeal.
Hey, y'all. My name is Brad Garapi. I work at Atlassian on the developer experience team.
Sweet. And this episode is sponsored by Rapid API, and I've done some content with Rapid API recently on my YouTube channel, which people can check out. But a couple of things that I do want to call out is they have a new client extension inside of VS Code for testing your API endpoints. I actually do that to generate some of the graphics for our social stuff. As I send a few pieces of data to an endpoint that's hosted in Next.js, it goes and generates a graphic, and then we can upload that to YouTube. And I test all of that through the Rapid API client. I also have a video on deploying an API to Rapid API where you can go and sell your API and make money from it. It's about as easy as it gets, I think. So it's pretty cool. Check them out at Rapid API. They're a lot of fun, and thank you for sponsoring. In this episode, we mentioned we're going to talk about breaking into tech with just a portfolio. The person who's going to lead us through that is Lane. So Lane, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to give people a little bit of info about you and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I'm Lane. I'm the founder of Boot Dev. It's a kind of a new platform where we teach people to learn to code, but specifically in a back-end context. I actually just quit my full-time. I've been a Go developer for the last 7 years. Quit my full-time job about 2 months ago to go full-time on Boot Dev. And yeah, it's been great. It's been great. But yeah, so we're all about kind of, interactive learning, breaking into tech, without a traditional CS degree. But the interesting thing about backend as opposed to front end is I do think there's kind of a lot of, CS concepts that actually do need to get taught, because you get asked that kind of stuff in interviews. So
I've always been a big advocate for myself of like people like, should I learn front end, back end? And I'm like, unless you
Yes.
have yes, unless you have, you're interested in one and specifically not the other. And even if that's still the case, I recommend going full stack so that you have a good understanding of how the web works as a whole. As a front end developer, you'll have a better understanding and better ability to work with a back end team and vice versa. So I've always been an advocate of like, unless you 100% know your path already and it doesn't involve the other, make sure to learn about both and how they fit together. And it'll make you more well-rounded, more understanding of both, and then open up more career opportunities, I think, too.
Which is hard because, a lot of people come into the space, like you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you may not even really know what back end or front end means. And like one interesting thing was, the reason I started building these courses a little over 2 years ago was my wife. She was working as an X-ray technician and she wanted to, become a programmer. She's always been really math minded and that sort of thing. But one of the biggest struggles is she's kind of just scouring the internet. And when I'm not helping her, she was kind of searching through, I heard I need to learn Java. Like, I guess I'll go do that thing. But like with no context of like, what kind of career path is that setting me down? Like, where do I end up in, a year from now?
I think that's a huge part of it is that's why community, I think, plays such a big part. That's why boot camps, I think, are so popular because for better or for worse, they give you a path. Like some boot camps are obviously better than others, but they give you a path and a support structure at least. I'm going to throw out one question. This is a little bit random, but I'd love to get your feedback since we have it from the chat. Should your portfolio include your resume and or CVs or downloadable PDF?
That's a really good question. It kind of depends on how you think about the word portfolio. And this is going to be probably important throughout the whole podcast episode. I come from a back-end context. So when I think about portfolio, I'm actually not even thinking about like a website that, you as a developer designed. That's almost certainly what it will look like if you're looking for front-end jobs. When I think about a back-end portfolio, I'm actually just thinking about like what's on your GitHub, right? Like what's some code that you've published that that employers are looking at. So I don't know if I have a good answer for that, to be honest, because I've never built a portfolio website, which is a weird thing. Since we're talking about this, the title of this episode may imply that.
So what have you done instead of developing like the typical portfolio? How do you demonstrate your work?
Yeah, so I mean, I've definitely gotten jobs through my portfolio, and that's why I'm a big believer that like your portfolio is probably the single most important thing you can have on the job search. Like if you have a really great portfolio, everything else can be like not that great. It can suck. But if you don't have a good portfolio, like you have to like nail everything else to get that first job. So for example, my portfolio, I just kind of consider it my GitHub profile. So my CV contains like my top 3 projects, just links to the GitHub on there. And for example, one of them is actually a library for RabbitMQ. It's like a Go client library for RabbitMQ. That's gotten me several jobs. But it's nothing, there's no visuals, there's no front end. It's like it's basically an NPM package, right? If you're coming from a JavaScript context.
Yeah, I think one thing you could do as well is like if you make your README look really good, that's probably the best visual aspect you have as a backend engineer of like how well polished your things are. If it's well documented, then the people looking at it are going to know you thought through it, you thought through the edge cases, you're thinking about your users, and I think that's pretty important. Now, I'm a front end type guy, and ideas in my head are like, man, if I was a backend engineer, I could build this interactive text editor where you could shoot off API requests from a website to demonstrate everything you built on the backend, and all the ideas just come. And I think that'd be another cool way to like show off a full stack app where instead of thinking about it from a front end first, where you're building a UI to accomplish a task, you're saying, I built a bunch of APIs to do a bunch of different things. How do I show those off with a user interface? It could be cool too.
Maybe we should take a hot second and just explain, like, if you are customizing your GitHub profile page, how do you do that? So if you create a repo that has the same name as your username and then add a readme.md to that file, then you can customize what actually gets displayed on your profile page. And there are several resources out there where you can add, like I have a Twitter icon and button, or I have labels for different skills and software that I'm proficient in. So we can include links to more information for that within the show notes.
I actually completely ripped mine off from, I've ripped a lot of things off from Brad, which I think he knows all this, so it's no secret, but lots of cool stuff that Brad has done. That's actually probably a video I'm going to record to queue up for next week on YouTube.
Nice.
Is I forget the name of the tool. I've got it in my notes, but it's a tool that'll basically generate a really cool README for you, and you can go and grab different pieces and add it in. Another tip I wanted to throw in for people from the perspective of like, how does your GitHub represent you, especially from a looking for a job perspective? And the specific question I had gotten was, do I include little projects? Are they worth putting on there? And my answer was like, maybe early on, especially, you really curate it to only have the things specifically that people want to look at. But another small tip that you can and should do is pin, I think you can do 6 of them. So pin 6 repositories where those are the ones that specifically out of 100 or however many you have, those are the ones you want people to look at. And Lane, I think it's such a cool story for yours. I think a lot of people have struggled with, well, if I write back in code, I have nothing to show. And unfortunately, I think like a nice UI for something, whether or not you're the best developer, goes a long way. Like it's almost a secret hack. Like you're going to get a little more attention because of it. But the cool thing you've done is you've taken something that like is all back end, right? It's not a visual thing, but it's something that's used by people. So your credibility comes from this thing being out there in the world, used by X number of people. They can go and see that, and they can see, hey, like reviews look good for this. People are using this. That goes a long way, especially when you look at bringing someone on to write production software, because you've already done that.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. If you can make your interview, like when you build applications as your portfolio projects, there's like a fairly low chance that the person who's interviewing you or looking through your resume is like the ideal user of that application, right? So it may just not be all that interesting to them. The nice thing about building libraries as at least part of your portfolio is that at the very least, your interviewer will understand why this is useful, right? And they get it from a coding perspective. Like, oh, this is how I would like connect to this database, and it's like batteries included, or maybe these other things. Like they kind of get the value proposition, like in product speak of what you're building, which is huge. Actually, on Boot Dev, we interject, you do 2 courses and then you're like supposed to go build a project. And you do 2 courses and you're supposed to go build a project. And I think it's really important that on your portfolio, I really think that before you go looking for that first job, it's great if one of those projects can be like a library. Not just because it'll help on the job search, but I think you learn so much when you're actually kind of thinking about building those API boundaries. Like, how do I build a library that's nice to use, that's good to use? You actually learn just a ton doing that for the first time. I don't think I ever did that before my first job, and it's something I wish I would have thought to do.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like important categories and boxes to tick when it comes to what your portfolio should include. I know for front end, there's some very typical things that you see and can do. But yeah, for back end, I think you got to have a library. You got to have an API. Outside of that, I'm not sure. But I think some other boxes that you can tick, though, like we mentioned, is a good README and also a solid test strategy. And I think if you can do things like that, they can see that you're well-rounded.
So,
I was just going to add, on the front end side, CodePen is fantastic. You can create a CodePen account and plug in different front end components that you've created. Sarah Drasner has a fantastic CodePen account. So I feel like mine's kind of trash because a lot of it's just experimentation, but she's really honed and refined hers to showcase what she's capable of doing on the front end. So if you're not using GitHub, that's another great place where you can dump stuff.
Yeah. Totally. For the last couple of years before I quit to go full time on Boot Dev, I was working as a hiring manager specifically for Go developers. And one thing that I was really big on when I was looking through people's portfolios on GitHub. So README is number one, right? If the README is crap, like I might not even click through to any of the code. So like it's got to explain what it does. It's got to explain how to use it. Apart from that, I would say like number two, most important thing, and this isn't required, but it's just a huge bonus if you have it. If your project has stars, it's like crazy social proof, right? If a candidate applies and a project has 100 stars, I'm like, wow, like, yeah, I'm still going to look through this, but I already know that 100 other people have thought this is cool. So you don't need that, but if you can get that somehow, it's really, really great. And then the other thing is I just want to clone it and do something with it. Like I want to clone it and run the tests. I want to clone it and build it. So as long as those instructions are there, like that's like 10% of people that apply that have even just those two things, like a great README and I can clone and run. Like if you just get there, you're in like the top 10%, which is awesome.
It's funny how some of the obvious details are also the ones that get overlooked, because we've had several people comment saying the exact same thing, Lane, that you just said in the chat. Like without a decent README, it's kind of like it's going to be overlooked. And it seems like such a simple thing. And I say this from like creating a lot of demo things for YouTube videos, and I never update my README. It's a different use case, but it's also like a little bit of laziness on my part.
Well, it's also not that every project you make needs, like, not every project you build needs to be your portfolio project. And I don't think you need to hide them, like make them private or anything like that. But it's exactly like you said, James. Like you want to pin them. You want to put like the top one or two like on your resume. You want to drive traffic, to use like the marketing funnel terms. You want to like drive traffic to your best couple repos. And those ones you spend a lot of time on. Like it's much better to have two great projects on your portfolio than like 6 kind of crappy ones. Yeah.
100%. Brad, I think you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes I actually find it hard to get recruiters to go through those steps of looking at a real GitHub project, cloning the repo, using it, looking through the source code. You know, I feel like they look at it and they're like, yeah, this person has projects. Great. Let's ask them that data structures and algorithms question that we have for every single other person, no matter what they've published, you know? Do you have the same experiences there?
I think there's like, to generalize, I think you can like take the people that you talk to in your like journey looking for a first job into like 2 buckets. You've got like the technical hiring managers, or maybe they're not even managers, but just like the technical hiring people, right? Sometimes they're individual contributors that are vetting you. And then you have like the non-technical people that you interact with throughout the whole process. So that would include sometimes recruiters, sometimes HR. And the way you interact with each is very distinct. So like projects are, I would argue, the most important thing when you're talking to technical people, and it's going to be what they're most interested in if you have good stuff to show. HR and recruiters, like, to be honest, I actually don't think the projects help that much, just because it doesn't compute. Like if you're not a developer, you're not really getting it. That's probably different on the front end. And again, I'm not coming from a front end context, because on the front end, you could just have like a really nice looking site for them to check out. And so that's great. But when I've worked with recruiters internally at the companies I've worked at, they're most interested in going to the technical team, getting a checklist of things, right? And then like sorting through all of the applications and giving a smaller list to the technical person. So when you're dealing with the non-technical people, it's more important, I think, that you just kind of figure out how you can present yourself in such a way that you check all the boxes that you probably need to check.
Right. It's like, I know, all these big name libraries and technologies that I need to convince you of. Do you feel as though, like, how does backend stack up to front end when it comes to like things you need to know? Front end has this reputation for getting increasingly complicated every day.
Well, we just mentioned a brand new build tool before we started recording. It came out at Next.js Conf.
I'm sure backend is also not easy, but do you still see like the same proliferation of tools? I got to say, I see more languages around nowadays than I remember hearing about, years ago.
So I just published a blog post last week where I actually crunched a bunch of data on this topic from Stack Overflow. First of all, I want to just like give the disclaimer that I'm pretty biased because I do run Boot Dev and it is a back-end like learning platform.
Totally. Yeah.
So I'm also a self-taught front-end developer. So I just have this huge bias, whereas I was like more formally taught on the back end. So anyways, to answer your question, something interesting about back-end is I do think that it takes on average a little longer, maybe 25%-ish longer to learn like the requisite things to get your first job as a backend developer than it would to get your first job as a front end developer, like assuming you're starting from zero. I think there's just like a little bit more, particularly in like the conceptual arena, less with technology, like because you can just learn like a single backend, maybe 2 backend languages, and like you're off to the races. You don't even need to learn like React. But there's like a lot of concepts you kind of need to learn, like Big O, databases, networking, maybe even some like infrastructure and DevOps stuff. But I don't think it's significant. I really think it's only like maybe 25% more time that you need to spend learning. But this is the interesting part. Way fewer people are applying to back-end jobs than front-end jobs. Like almost an order of magnitude less. At my last job, we would open up an entry-level back-end position or an entry-level front-end position. It would be like literally the difference between like 200 applicants and like 25 or 30 applicants. So if you happen to enjoy back-end, which is like what I think is the biggest question, right? When you're trying to decide what to focus on. And like James said, full stack is also a great option. But like if you're trying to decide and you do like back-end, I do think there's this huge advantage in that fewer people are applying. And then just the piece of data I was talking about with Stack Overflow that was interesting was I went through the last 10 years of Stack Overflow data. And on average, every year, there's been twice as many back-end developers employed as developers than front-end developers, which actually blew me away. I was expecting there to be more front-end than back-end developers. So
Okay,
maybe I'll link that data somewhere, but it was really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I can feel those numbers make sense to me. I feel like there's more back-end devs to front-end devs. And it especially depends on like tooling inside of a company too, how fast you can move on either the front end or the back end. If you've got some really good internal things that spin up services, repositories, libraries, whatever, you can move really fast. And it just depends on like the, how do I say this? Like the maturity of the teams executing.
Yeah, I think the reason it probably surprised me so much, I've worked at really small companies for most of my career. Like 2 companies ago, I was at like an 8-person company. And like the largest company I've worked at was 600 people. And so it's always been like a pretty even balance between the two. But my guess is as the companies get larger, you probably need more infrastructure and more stuff going on in the back end. So that does make sense.
So I wanted to cue you up for a fun topic, I think. We kind of mentioned the data structures and algorithms piece. How do you feel about those as part of the interviewing process, maybe for different types of jobs? And also just one fun fact one interesting thing I posted about this on Twitter, like how many people have gotten jobs without ever doing a whiteboarding data structures algorithms interview, and an overwhelming amount of people said they've never done one and that they've had like really successful careers. So I think some people are really fearful of having to do that, which understandably it's a pretty intimidating, difficult thing to do, but maybe it's not as popular as it is played up to be. So anyway, just general thoughts on like those types of whiteboarding, data structures, and algorithms. What are your thoughts on those being a part of the interview process?
I have like super mixed feelings on this. So I feel like usually when I talk to people about this, I'm either like disagreeing and wishing there was less data structures and algorithm stuff, or on the other end, like, so I wish there was more education for like entry-level people to learn like the basic data structures and algorithms, but in a context that more directly applies to how you actually use them, right? So for example, like, I don't think I've ever written a binary tree from scratch. I've written a trie a couple times, but like that said, it's super important to understand like why log n lookups are great as opposed to like order n lookups, especially like in a databases context. Like, oh, I need to index this column so I can look it up quickly. So like, I do think people need to be learning this stuff, but like they need to be learning it in like colleges do not teach it in a context that applies directly to software engineering jobs. So that's something I'm trying to change with Boot Dev. Like we do data structures and algorithms, but I try to give like really good examples of where it actually is used. but to get back to the question, like how it relates to interviewing, my favorite interviewing style by far is if you're the technical person giving the interview, you're having the interviewee present code that they've already written to you and explain why they wrote it a certain way, explaining architectural decisions. I'm not a fan of whiteboarding. I'm even less a fan of live coding. Like probably because I'm biased, I just like tense up when I'm like live coding. I cannot type when someone's looking over my shoulder. So yeah, I guess to answer the question, I think it's important to learn them, but I wish it happened less in interviews because I just don't think it's important to be able to recall off the cuff how to write one. You can look it up, and like if you're familiar with the concept, you can look up the syntax and figure it out in a couple hours. Like it's not an actual hurdle to your job.
This is what we've joked about me in the past where I get excited about someone else's point and I'm like nodding my head so aggressively that I'm gonna like hurt something.
I'm glad we're on the same page. I feel like it should be fairly obvious. I don't know why like the industry has been stuck with some of these things for so long, but here we are.
How do you feel about pairing?
In an interview or like just in a like work context?
So where I work at Zeal, when we've done hiring, I'm trying to think how we've experimented with several different models. We don't do whiteboarding, but a lot of times we will pair with someone. And you could compare that to live coding. And I know there's like a mental model and psychology there, like a frame that a mindset you get in where you're like, oh goodness, I'm in an interview, they're testing me. So I get that pressure point exists. But for us, a lot of times we really do pair a lot. And so one of the things in the interview process is just understanding, how do you pair? Like when I'm pairing with somebody in an interview, I don't care whether they're like, I don't know this. I want to know, great, how do you handle that? And how do you think through it? Or what questions are you asking? What are you looking on Google? So in my mind, I guess some of those live coding sessions are helpful to know how they're going to interact with somebody that they get paired with. That's kind of the question behind the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So here's like, I've never done a pairing interview. Here's the one question I have that I think will like let me be able to jump to probably like a conclusion that I shouldn't jump to. In the pairing, is the person who's like driving is the interviewer, are they helping? Like, are they?
I've helped when I've done it, so I can say yes. It's like if they say, oh, I don't know this, I'm like, hey, try this, or check this out, or what if we do this? So I try and help, but I don't interject. I wait for them to say, I'm not sure what this is going to be.
Yeah. So I don't. The honest answer is I don't know, but the guess answer is I tend to think I wouldn't like it just because I really don't like live coding, and like I tend to be a fairly extroverted person even for a programmer, and like I'm okay talking to people, and I just tense up so much when I'm typing while someone else is watching. But that said, if the environment of it is like super collaborative rather than just like someone watching you code, like maybe that would work out.
Yeah, it's still hard. I get it's an interview, so it's still hard to get over that. And people aren't necessarily going to say, I don't know how to do that, I need your help, because it is an interview.
Yeah. And do you do it in an editor that like they're familiar with, or is it more like a third party thing?
I think when I've done it, so this might change the context a little bit. I've interviewed front end developers. I know back end stuff, but I don't think I've interviewed anybody on the back end side. So we've used CodePen, but I'm usually letting them drive and share their screen versus me doing it on my machine. So if it was VS Code or something like that, it would be a setup that they're familiar with.
See, that makes a big difference. The kind of anecdotally, I applied to Google like right out of college, and the interview process was me in a Google Doc, them in the same Google Doc, watching me type Go code in a Google Doc. Like fighting the auto format of Google Doc. I wanted to kill myself. It was awful.
That's gross, man. That's so gross. Oh.
In the wrapping. Let's not talk about that.
It was so bad. Yeah.
Kind of wrapping. Different kind of text wrapping, I'm assuming, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's an interesting question from the Scion God on Twitch. Question: what do you think about cracking a light joke to break the tension in an interview? Is it regarded as unprofessional in the industry? They have that sort of personality, and for me, like, I 100%. Well, like, I think the number one thing is for you to feel comfortable, and anything that you can do that is respectable and acceptable and not rude to anyone to get yourself into that mode of just feeling more comfortable. 100%. And I think like interviews should be more just people having conversations. Now they can be like, you can be nervous, understandably, but like good interviewers want you to be in a situation where you're going to show them your best, right? Like, just because you're terrified of interviews doesn't mean you're not a super talented person. So they want to get you good ones, want to get you to that level of comfortness. So sometimes maybe they would crack a joke too to help kind of ease that tension.
I remember we had Sean Day person on episode 52, and she was talking about how she would do, if you can figure out who's interviewing you before the interview, she would go and do research on everybody so that you would know, okay, is this person a lighthearted person? Or she might even ask, if she didn't know the person and like directly interviewing her, if she could find somebody that knew that person to find out information, not to be a creeper, but to know, like, can I ask a question about their kids? Do they have kids? Or what are some things that they're interested in, just so that she could connect with them on a personal level and make the interview a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, breaking the ice is always good. I don't know why. Like if someone's if like a not off color joke like doesn't, like if that makes someone uncomfortable, like that would just be weird. Like I don't even know if I'd want to work there. Like that'd be strange if I like can't crack a joke in an interview, as long as it's not like terrible or something.
I think if you can crack a joke in an interview, it's going well. Like, do you ever get to the point in some interviews where like you are starting to feel comfortable with the person you're talking to? It's turning into a conversation rather than like a test. I think it's a sign of something good where like, there's a rapport that's been established and like they think well of you and things are going well. So like, I don't know. I think I would do that later on in the interview to gauge where you're at rather than right at the beginning, which might cause some people to be like, "Ooh, that, you know, I don't know if I like that or not. Somebody's too serious or something like that."
I think definitely a little bit of like read the room is helpful. But again, ideally people are like trying to have everyone be in a comfortable situation. What are you going to say, Amy?
So the Cyan God did say if James, you were interviewing, they would say nice shoes, which I think is hilarious because we have no idea what shoes you're wearing right now.
I can't get my leg high enough. But someone, I forget, I think someone in Discord, or maybe it was Cyan before, commented on really liking my shoes that I wore in a picture from me speaking at Render ATL, which I love those shoes too.
Oh, so. I did recognize those. I do know what shoes those are.
Yeah.
I did notice.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
You do run the risk of someone really dumb like me interviewing you and just having like the joke go over their head and now it's uncomfortable.
And then it's awkward. Yeah.
But I don't know how you plan for that.
Oh, funny. I did want to ask Brad. So Brad, I think you've interviewed more recently than anybody else because you've been at Atlassian for 1 year. What was maybe the most unique interview experience you had, and or what was the best interview experience you had?
Okay, I'll give you one interview I basically walked out on because they were trying
to name companies.
No, yeah. One interview I basically walked out on because they were trying to ask me data structures and algorithms questions that like had no bearing on me. Another one, though, was really cool. They were asking me a data structures and algorithms question. And I was like, hey, like, I appreciate the question. Do you guys actually use this in the front end? And they said, yes, we do. And I'm like, no way. Could you tell me the application? I'm like, great. I appreciate, frame it the way you framed, like how and why this is important to your product, to know that you're not just asking me this stuff because it's out of a textbook. So that was really cool. That was like a good justification for data structures and algorithms. It was like a nested table of contents type thing for a left sidebar. But yeah, I think some of the better interviews I've had are the ones where the interviewers have just looked at my portfolio and you can tell it immediately turns into like, this person's already validated. Now let's just talk about their interest, about what they struggle with, about what they like, what they don't like, and how they might fit on this team. And
if they're
those are the ones that I think are just more more effective.
Mm-hmm.
One interesting thing that we've done a couple times already is almost like redefine what portfolio means, or at least open up people's interpretation to think about a portfolio means different things. So Lane, you mentioned like you don't have a portfolio website, and I think people are like, why the hell are you talking about portfolios on this podcast? But the answer is like your portfolio is not just a landing page that shows projects that you worked on. Your portfolio in this case is your GitHub, and then seeing a project on NPM. My portfolio at this point in my career doing technical content is my YouTube channel. I don't need to go and create a page that says I've created a bunch of YouTube videos. Go and look at YouTube and you can see those things. So like your maybe just the definition of what a portfolio is, we can kind of open people's minds to say like it could be a lot of different things. It's whatever it is that actually shows the things that are most impactful for the job that you're applying for, that other people can go and look and use to gauge whether or not you're a person that they want to interview and potentially hire.
Yeah, I mean, interviewers are like trying to see if they can get enough evidence, like almost objective evidence. There's like some threshold, right? Like we need enough evidence that you're able to do like X, Y, Z. And then everything after that, hopefully in the interview is like conversational. Are we going to get along? Like that kind of stuff. And the more effective your portfolio is, the higher it raises the bar before you even go into the interview. It's exactly like you said. Like if you have a YouTube channel, that's a thing, right? A great GitHub, that's a thing. If you write blog posts, that's a thing. I will say, I just rattled off like 3 things. I don't recommend entry-level people like go do all of those things. That's probably a great way to like split your attention and have like a crappy YouTube channel and not a great blog and it's not a great project. So like I would say, especially on the back end, like projects are the most important. If you happen to be passionate about blogging and you're a good writer, maybe publishing some blog posts can be great. But just like with everything, I do think that like quality over quantity, super, super important. It's better to have 2 amazing blog posts that show off how great of an understanding you have over like certain subjects than like just going and like rehashing, I don't know, how to set up VS Code or something.
Yep. Definitely with you. Here's the fun one. This is a pretty common question I think people ask a lot. How about someone's working for a company with an NDA and then they can't show the code that they've worked on, and maybe they can't even talk about the code that they've worked on? Any recommendations for how people would handle that from an interview perspective and or from a portfolio perspective?
I have a couple thoughts here. So because I use that tactic of like, do you have some code you can bring to the interview that we can look over before? I definitely did run into some people who were like, no, none of my code we can look at. It's all proprietary. I'm a little skeptical of that. Like I'm only asking for like a file or 2, right? And if you have an NDA, like re-examine it, like make sure that, is it really not okay that there's not like this tiny bit of the code base that you can share, like even just a file or 2, maybe like a single component or something. And apart from that, like, is there really no code that you've written outside of this, like this, this contractual NDA that you're under that we can look at? Like, I'm just super skeptical if those things are being told to me. Like, it doesn't seem right. Like, how do you have no code that we can look at? But I could be way off base. That's just how I've felt when people have come to me with that.
Yeah, I think maybe an acceptable alternative to that too is you could find code on the internet that's like relevant to something you've worked on to use as a talking point, because all of that is there to bring about a conversation, to know that they understand what they're talking about, right? Like that's really what, at the end of the day, what the goal of that is. So maybe there's the potential to like not bring in code, but like give an example of an architecture diagram of like, if I wanted to do messages and I don't need to wait for their response to come back to me, I just need to dump them out somewhere, I would use a queue and I can have this many listeners to that. And then I can just send the message and I can be done with it. And I can ignore it. It's async and it has these benefits, etc. So I think that would be like the responsibility of the person, if you don't have that starting talking point, to create that talking point and bring that scenario to the table and talk about why, in a scenario that's not specific to anything, if I didn't need to have an acknowledgement to this, I just needed to get it out there and know that it's there, I would use this, and here's why, and the benefits, etc. So I think there would be a way to craft that story to at least have the conversation that would then be useful in the interview.
I think that would be great. Yeah, if someone came back to me with like, "Hey, I'm gonna put together a couple documents that outline the architecture of the back end that I have worked on. I can't show you code, but like
Yep.
we'll be able to talk about that for an hour, right?" And that's really what I'm concerned about is getting the interviewee talking, because that's how you find out what they know, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. I've
That's-
also genericized front end components. So I've built something for a client and then I've kind of pulled it back, stripped away some of the branding and maybe changed the numbers and the content so that I can share that piece with somebody.
Do you want to maybe transition a little bit? Do you want to give a little bit of the origin of boot.dev? And there's I specifically, so a couple of different questions around this that I think I want to get to in the last 10 or 15 minutes that we have. What was kind of the inspiration for that? What's like, with you doing this full time, what's kind of the status of like, how many people do you have involved, success stories, that sort of stuff? And then want to take a minute or two to talk about how you've incorporated WASM into that, which is WebAssembly. And that's a topic I hear about a lot. I think it's a buzzword a lot of people have heard about. I don't have great knowledge of like what it is or how it works. I'd love to get to that too, but maybe just the starter of like, what was the idea? What was the reasoning behind starting boot.dev and going full time on that?
Yeah, great question. So I gave just like a little bit of it earlier, but let me give a little more detail. So my wife was working as an X-ray tech. This is 3 years ago. I'm working as a back-end engineer, and she's going on call at like 1 a.m, getting paid $45 for the on-call appointment, spending like 3 hours in the work med that she was at. I'm going with her because she's worried about going out at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? So like both of us are getting up, going out for 3 hours. We're getting paid $45. Like it was insane. My wife's very, very smart. She was like valedictorian in high school, math minded. So she wants to get into back end development. And I'm like, look, going back to school, that's not it. Like, you've already been to school. I'm sure we can find a great program online. But I started looking, and like almost everywhere that we found was like really focused on front end stuff, in terms of like self-taught stuff online, and very little computer science stuff, which I just knew, like through all the interviews I'd been through, it's very likely when you go into a back-end interview that you're going to be asked some data structures and algorithms questions. So basically, I'm just like seeing this gap in the market, and I'm really passionate about like learning by doing. And so the stuff that I could find was all video, and video is great, but I really wanted, her to be able to be writing code and like building projects and publishing them and that kind of stuff. So that was what started me building this. So I did the stupid thing and built a platform first.
You hear that, Amy?
I didn't build a platform first. I'm building it
first.
second.
Oh, that's smarter.
This is an ongoing conversation that we have. Please continue.
Yeah. I did the stupid thing and built a platform first.
Third. First is by a domain. Sorry.
Yeah. I built the platform, and I was like looking into, okay, how do I make it so this thing will scale? Which is a really dumb way to think about businesses when you don't have any audience and nobody's on your platform. I was really worried about like people executing infinite for loops if I'm running their code on my servers. So that was where the genesis of the idea, of like, oh, well, what if I take their code, compile it to WebAssembly, run it in their browser, and give them a cancel button, right? So that's how it started. I started with just a Go course, because Go is and still is like my bread and butter. So the way it works with WebAssembly is you write some code in the browser. You like start off with there's like an assignment description, then you have like some starter code, and your job is to edit the code. So you edit the code. When you click run, I take the code, just the text, ship it to my server where I compile it to WebAssembly. And then I take that WebAssembly bundle, ship it back to your browser, and it runs in your browser, right? If anything's wrong, if you're trying to mine Bitcoin or something, you can do so with your own compute resources. And that's basically how it works. With Go, I compile it to WebAssembly. With Python, we're using a project called Pyodide, that basically is an entire Python interpreter written in WebAssembly. So you're actually interpreting the code in your own browser. And then JavaScript is our other courses, and those just run in your browser, right? So
okay, so you're making an API request to do the WASM compilation, right?
Yep.
Okay, so what you get back then is a string, a buffer, something like that, right?
Buffer, yeah.
So then like, how do you take that and actually execute it? I've never done anything in WebAssembly. So you've got this buffer that represents WebAssembly.
Yeah,
Is
you
there
have
like
this
a web
buffer.
API to run it in the browser essentially?
Yeah, so like the browser has a WebAssembly API. There's a function. You could go look up like the MDN docs on it. I think it's called instantiate streaming. You basically give it a buffer of WebAssembly bytes. I actually run it in a web worker, which was awesome when I made that switch. So I was running it in the main thread of the browser. I swapped it out. So now I'm running it in a web worker so that you can still interact with the UI, because like we're doing data structures and algorithms and some of this stuff. So like I want it to run for like 10 seconds so you can see how long some of this stuff takes. And it's really important that your UI doesn't lock up while that's happening. But yeah, the browser APIs are pretty robust at this point. Go is interesting. You have to include like a bunch of glue code in JavaScript that is actually published by the Go team. So you have to include that. But every language is a little different. I had it running Rust for a while. That one's glue code was actually insane. And I removed support because we didn't have any Rust courses, and it was just kind of a pain to maintain. But yeah, it's worked really well so far.
It's crazy. And so then how do you, like, as the code is running and let's say spitting out things to the console, how do you get the web worker to relay that to the main thread?
So I hijack console.log, which is weird. Like in JavaScript, if you go look at my web worker, it's literally like console.log equals, and I like set it to my own function. Because all of our grading of assignments is based on standard out. So whether you're writing Go, JavaScript, or Python, we're looking at your standard out. There's like a test suite that's going to spit out specific things. And that's how I'm like kind of grading, making sure that your code's doing what I expect it to. But yeah, so in the web worker, I'm like hijacking standard out basically. And then between web worker and main thread, you can send messages. There's like an API to just send messages back and forth. So that's how that's happening.
So you write a custom log function that is then tapping into that ability to send messages back and forth between main thread and web worker thread.
Yep.
Cool.
I also
That's
have
really
to capture standard error because imagine coding without getting compiler and interpreter errors. Like that's not it. So
yeah, that's not it. That's so cool.
So I heard you mention several languages. Go, Rust, Python. Do you have a recommendation for where somebody should start?
Yes, this has evolved over time. Boot Dev at this point, we have 19 units, so courses and projects. The courses are done in the browser. The projects you actually just do on your local machine and then like post it in a GitHub repo to kind of pass off your project. Originally, Boot Dev started in JavaScript. I've changed it since then. I changed it over the summer. We now start in Python, and we basically go through, I call it computing basics. We like teach you how code works. We do some object-oriented programming, data structures and algorithms, like very abstract stuff. Again, still like really trying to tie it into real-world scenarios. But I really like starting in Python because the syntax just reads like English. Like it's just really, really good for entry-level people. And then we go into JavaScript. And the reason we do JavaScript next is because I think that even as a backend developer, and again, like if you're going to do full stack, which is great, it's important to understand what the heck a backend is. You can't really understand that unless you come at it from a front-end context of like, I'm going to make some requests to this backend server and get some data out of it, right? So that's why we do JavaScript next. We're basically writing clients to hit backend servers as like a Learn HTTP course. And then after that, we finally get into Go, and that's where we do like the majority of our backend work. We do SQL. Oh yeah, we support SQL now too. Nice. But all that backend stuff, yeah, you're basically building REST APIs in Go and using SQLite and that kind of stuff. So
I love the focus here on the back end. It really resonates with me when you kind of talked about the disproportionate amount of people that are applying for jobs. And I think there is good reason for it. I think we're seeing the industry become a little more top heavy with entry level developers. And that's because like people are recognizing tech as an industry that's just, for the most part, a really amazing thing to be in. So people are going to boot camps and they're learning on their own, et cetera. But the majority of the resources that you see are going to be front end. Free Code Camp being the #1 resource that people start with. Then you look at even boot camps are going to be more front end heavy, and they're not going to, even when they do the back end, they're not going to dive deep into data structures, algorithms, and that sort of stuff because they honestly just don't have time. So I think it makes sense to see that like disproportionate amount of people, but there's also just tons of job and lots of money to be made in the back end. So I think it's great to have resources that help people get to that point with that path, with that structure that we talked about, people often lack early on. Just really quickly, a feel for like an update on like where it is as a platform, like I don't, whatever numbers or anything you feel like sharing, but maybe number of people that are onboarded, success stories, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, totally. I try to be as open as I can. So, like I said, started 2.5 years ago. I basically launched into the void of like having no audience and no people. So we started literally at zero, and we had almost no users for like the first year. At this point, I've had 20,000 people create accounts over the last 2.5 years.
Wow.
We have 500 paying members, so it's a subscription service to get access to like all the content. There's a free tier that's quite permissive, but to get everything, we're a subscription.
And how much is the subscription, the monthly subscription right now?
If you pay for a year up front, it's $24 a month. Okay. If you pay for a month at a time, it's $34 a month.
Sweet. That's so cool.
And in terms of revenue, so we're just bumping up into like $9,000 a month in revenue at the moment. So yeah, it's been great. I have one employee. So we're still not yet profitable, but we're working towards that.
Fair enough. That's so cool. This is the kind of stuff that just being in tech and being around developers gets me so excited, is being able to use the skills that you have to do whatever the hell you want, and do it because it's something you're excited about, do it because it benefits other people, because it provides opportunities, and build a business out of it is so amazing. That's the stuff that just gets me really inspired.
Yeah, I have way more fun getting up in the morning and working on the platform
that,
and content than what I was doing before. I liked what I was doing before, right? That's why I recommended it to my wife, but it's just even better now.
I love it.
I'm always really curious about that like pivotal moment when you decide to jump ship from the stable job and invest in your own thing. Was there anything that really helped push you over the edge? Was it a clear-cut decision, or was it more difficult?
So yeah, it's super terrifying. So I have a daughter who's now 19 months. We're like getting close to 2 years.
I thought you were going to say 19.
I know. I was you're young for that.
much older than I look. No, yeah. So like 18 months. And my wife. So yeah, it was a little. I mean, I ended up leaving at about $6,000 a month in revenue, which is not as much as I was making as an engineering manager at like a larger company. But like the reason I decided to jump ship at the end was just because people were really liking it. Like I saw that like this thing has legs. If I put more time into it, I think it'll just keep growing. So at the end of the day, it was kind of a qualitative decision, I guess.
Yeah. I would always wonder if I just worked shorter days until the company caught on and then eventually got fired and tried to write out the previous paycheck. I wouldn't do it, but man, like that would be
that almost certainly would have worked at my last job.
You hear that, Atlassian?
But I wouldn't.
Yeah, don't fire Brad.
Like if Brad had timesheets secretly, it would be 40 hours, 39 hours, 38 hours, down to 4 or 5 hours a week.
Unless you know how timesheets actually work, and then it would just be 40 hours, 40 hours.
Yeah. If there was a legitimate timesheet that tracks that he wasn't filling out.
Yeah.
Anyway. I don't think we mentioned this, and I'll admit that I am unprepared for this, but we have a section called Picks and Plugs that we do at the end of our episodes where we pick something that we've enjoyed recently. It could be a TV show, or mostly it's stuff that Amy and I buy on Amazon, and then plug something that we want people to share as well. Does anybody have picks and plugs that's ready to share?
Oh, I'm ready.
I'll do it. All right, Amy will start us off.
So my pick for the week is going to be a mobile app called iExit. So we did a little bit of traveling a few weeks ago. We drove down to Miami. So from Nashville, it was like a 14-hour drive. We split it up over 2 days. But there's an app called iExit. And what it does is it tells you all of the upcoming exits and the rest stops. And you can check to see what gas stations are there, what restaurants. So it's really helpful when you're trying to figure out where to stop. So highly recommend iExit. We've used it for years. And it's great and free. For my plug, oh man, James, don't hate me. I'm going to plug Advent. That's
last year.
Well, you can go there and sign up. So go to adventofcss.com and advent of JavaScript or adventofjs.com, and it'll get you the same place. Go ahead and sign up. You can do the free tier and you'll get an update for this year. So we're trying to coordinate it, or I'm trying to coordinate it this year where we get help. We're not, won't just be me and James creating videos, but we're trying to tag the Avengers of tech to help create courses for CSS and JavaScript. So
Approved.
okay, good.
Lane or Brad, do you have Pix plugs? I can go too if that helps.
I can go really quick. Pick Better Call Saul. My wife and I just finished it.
Oh, TV show?
Yeah.
Okay.
TV show. Really good. Plugs.
Was that a spin-off of something?
Spin-off of Breaking Bad, yeah. I actually
haven't seen either one. Okay.
I did. My wife and I got like 3 seasons into Breaking Bad and weren't super into it. I think Better Call Saul is like way better, actually.
Really? Okay.
Hence the name. Better.
Better. And then my plug would be Bevy. I went to a Rust meetup last night and was learning about Bevy. It's a game engine for Rust.
So interesting.
If you're interested in game stuff in Rust, check it out.
That's really cool. I don't know if anyone has experience with this, but I'd like to test out like a JavaScript game engine. I don't know what the big ones. I think like Phaser is one that I've heard of, but I haven't seen this stuff in a while.
Anya Kubo has some on her channel
where she uses a framework because she does so much of it from scratch.
Some of it. Well, I saw one for Mario that she was using a framework. I haven't looked into it. I just know that my son has been interested in games, and my attempt to get mom cool points.
You were like,
have thought
you
about
can play games if you build them from scratch with JavaScript.
Well,
that's the only way you will have fun.
What's funny was I was telling him about, what's the engine you used to use that's no code or low code, James?
Construct.
Yeah, I was telling him about that and was like, hey, you guys should design a game. So him and his buddy designed all these screens. And I was so proud because it's like, you have to design everything. So they're designing UI interfaces and menus. But the game, I think, is called King of Babies, which is perfect for an 8-year-old. But anyways, they have this whole story. Yeah. So I wanted to help him and his friend build it.
Yeah. That's super cool. It's a great way to go. It's a great tool. I did a lot of workshops and stuff with that for years. Brad, are you ready?
Yeah. Okay. So my pick is going to be the Oculus Quest 2. And I know like the new one just came out or whatever. But this is the one I have. Work provided it to me, which is awesome. Thanks, Atlassian. And honestly, what I really like about it is that like I've done one-on-ones with my manager in mini golf, in the Oculus and stuff like that. And like our teams do like Friday social hours in mini golf or some other games like that. So I think it's like a really pretty fun networking tool rather than like all sitting on like a Zoom happy hour. It's just
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's my pick. I have 2 plugs today, if you don't mind. So one is obviously my YouTube channel. I'm still inching closer to the 1,000 subscribers. So if you don't mind, subscribe, youtube.com/Brad Garapy. But the second one, Atlassian is participating in Extra Life, which is a charity event for children's hospitals. And so we're streaming for 24 hours, starting at 10 p.m. last night, ending at 10 p.m. tonight. So you can... Whoa, Ashley edited that one out. So you can check the live stream on twitch.tv/Atlassian Gamers. And if you want to donate, there's donation links there, or you can donate to my personal link. It's all the same. It all goes to the same stuff. But This is my Extra Life profile. Again, it's all benefiting children's hospitals through gaming on Twitch.
Very cool.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'll be streaming, well, not only now, but probably later tonight, like some games or coding or something, and plugging a lot more of this with like special overlays and stuff.
Cool.
Do it. Love it. I'm gonna go with actually someone kind of guessed at what my thing was. So I think I actually pick this mic before? I thought I
No.
did. So it's not actually. Oh, it's not. Well, then I'll pick
I haven't
the mic
seen it.
then. Have I? Oh, okay. Anyway, this is so I use the Shure SM7B as my main microphone. It's an XLR mic, which means the only way to get it connected to the computer is XLR cable through at least an interface, and mine goes through a preamp into an interface. So I bought the slightly lower version from Shure that's very close in terms of quality as far as I can tell, the Shure MV7. So it has both like a USB-C cable that you can use as well as XLR, or not USB-C. It's something. So you can plug it directly into through USB into your computer, which is great because that's what I'm going to take with me when I travel to still record stuff. And I took this with me to Europe, and I never used it because I didn't have an adapter to actually connect this to the little tripod that I have. So I ended up
bummer. So you just carried it around.
Yep, it was just there with me the whole time because it's got a 5/8 hole. I think is what that is. And then most of the standard tripod stuff I found out are a quarter and not 3/8 because I bought 3/8 and that didn't fit either. So anyway, I've got like this kind of chained set of screw adapters. There we go. That go into the microphone and then now allow me to attach it to my regular little tiny tripod that I could use for my phone too. So if I'm going to a conference, I could take this. I could use the mic in the hotel room if I need to. I can also take the tripod, the little tiny one, and just put my phone on it to do like random stuff that would be fun. Yeah, TikTok stuff mainly.
So is that like a screw set?
I actually had like one adapter and then I bought another adapter to finish it off. So it's two little screw adapters that plug into the mic itself and then from there down plug into or have the stand screw into it, if that makes sense.
Okay. I think I've seen Sarah Dietschy have like a kit that she's like, this has every single adapter you would ever need. I'm like, that's brilliant.
I've got a bunch of them now. So I've got a few different sets. Yeah. So anyway, so this will be my, like, if we record podcasts while I'm on the road type thing, I'll use that mic in the future. So I'm excited for that. I guess for plug, I'm going to do TikTok since I mentioned that too. So I do TikTok video several times a week, have a lot of fun with that. Some of it's satirical, some of it's just fun. Some of it's poking fun at the industry. Some of it's like short tips and stuff. So I enjoy spending time on TikTok. Probably too much, but it's fun. So James Q Quick on TikTok. And I think that is going to wrap up the episode. For people that are listening in your podcatcher, make sure to leave a rating and review to help other people find the podcast. And we will be back for another live episode next Friday. In the meantime, that's all we got. And we're still live, by the way. That was just the ending of the podcast. Thanks, everyone, for coming in the chat. Appreciate it. We had good conversation and questions and stuff in there, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. This was fun.